The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. On that day, Jesus went out from the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, "The sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some seed fell on the rocky ground where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep, and when the sun rose, it was scorched and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The Gospel of the Lord. Some seeds fell where they couldn't find roots, too shallow, too little nourishment. We ought to hear. Tell me something, girl. Are you happy in this modern world? Do you need more? Is there something else you've been searching for? I'm falling. In all the good times, I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times, I fear myself. Well, those are the opening lyrics to an old song from the movie, I think, A Star is Born, or the remake of that movie, The Star is Born, starring Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. And I think they go back and forth to sing that song called Shallow. There's a way in which it's, I think, a kind of a plea for something deeper, for something more. It goes on in one of the verses, "I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground, crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now." Well, that word shallow was in my mind, maybe in my heart too, as I read today's gospel a while ago and looked at this parable that Jesus has where, again, sowing seed, throwing it out, hoping it grows. And there's a way in which you can look at the different places that the seed lands and what happens to it. And of course, it becomes kind of a metaphor. But the one that always strikes me is the one that lands on rocky ground where there was little soil, and it sprang up and then it got scorched because it didn't have roots. It wasn't rooted. And I feel like right now, at least for me, I look at my own world, my own culture, my own times, and I feel like there's a lot of unrootedness. I think there's a way in which we are looking at ways in which we can seek good times to find a deeper sense of ourselves, and at other times we're struggling in bad times to see that our worst kind of reactions, our worst selves may come out, so we fear ourselves. The old song from A Star is Born may be, in fact, a song as we just celebrated our nation's Independence Day, which should have been a star-studded event. It really wasn't. It was kind of a flop in many ways, in many places. People did their own local thing, and that seemed to work really well. People celebrated as authentically as they could. But when it came to something like a nation celebrating, it really fell flat. Partly because I think something that could have been a deep reflection on who and what we are and where we need to go turned into kind of people turning it into a kind of silly, shallow celebration in some ways, and even trying to twist the narrative away from the real values of our country over these last 250 years, and our struggle maybe to continue to realize those aspirations and values and hopes. And so I think we opted for, unfortunately, here and there, a shallowness when we could have gone to a depth. The gospel today and the readings this weekend, I think, are challenging us to be nourished from something deep, a deep place in our relationship with God, and let the grace of that relationship with God then nourish us so that we can be a source and nourishment to each other and deeper senses of relationships with one another, whether that's in our own personal networks or as a community, as a nation. And I think we really need to pray for that grace from God to give us that. If we're going to have the kinds of conversations, the deep conversations, the important kind of conversations that can allow us to make healthy and good decisions, as opposed to live in fear, to be reactionary into out of an insecurity or worse, we can then live in a place where we simply just attack each other, truncate battles with one another, get ourselves into conflicts we shouldn't be in, and all of that just makes more of a mess. Sometimes I think these days we're being led into a place where everything we touch now seems to turn to crap, to be honest. Things that could have been easy and should have been fine, like a celebration of our 250 years as a nation, that should just unfold itself. It should happen in the best possible way if you don't even mess with it. But if you mess with it and make it something less than it is, and I think we do that with other things, more important things in our lives, to be honest. We out of a fear or insecurity, we start to mess with them and we make them less. We opt for the shallow when in fact we're being invited to something deeper. So this week, as we go into July, as we have this midsummer kind of moment, as in some ways many of us may slow down a little bit as we kind of deal with the heat and the storms and the crazy weather, whatever it is, let's not be afraid to look inside and look to one another for where we may be identifying a grace that allows us to be that good seed that falls on good soil, that allows us to not opt for the shallow, but to deepen who and what we are, to get a deeper sense of rootedness in God and in each other, so that we can then move forward as a community, as families, as in our relationships, grounded in that deepness, not in some shallow sense of fear and insecurity, but in a deep sense of being accompanied by God, a deep sense that grace is real and being given to us even in the midst of the crazy world we live in, and that through that then we can find ourselves far from the shallow and into the deep. The seed. God's throwing us the seeds of grace all the time. They're landing on good soil, which is us, but we sometimes then brush it off onto something else and let it die or be picked up or be choked. Let it fall on us and let us be the deep soil so that we can be rooted in who God is for us and who God makes us for each other, and live in those communities of the beloved, of loving action, of justice, establishing peace, establishing a security, a depth of security with one another, whether that's in small communities and local communities or certainly national and international communities. I'm falling in all the good times I find myself longing for change. But in the bad times, I fear myself. But let's dive into the deep, friends, and become the good soil, producing good fruit. If we have ears to hear this, hearts to hear this, then we ought to.